I'm Rebecca Tasker. I'm a builder and co-founder of Simple Construct Naturally Healthy Homes. We specialize in using natural, biogenic materials such as straw to build high-performance homes with smaller carbon footprints. For San Diego Sustainable Building Week 2021, I'd like to share with you some of the information that inspires us about how bio-based materials can not only reduce embodied carbon in buildings, but can actually draw down and store enough carbon to become carbon sinks. By now, we're all familiar with the impressive work of Architecture 2030 and their mission to transform the built environment into a central solution to the climate crisis. Let's use one of their graphics to start with the difference between operational carbon and embodied carbon. As you can see in this chart, the building sector is responsible for almost half of global CO2 emissions every year. About 30% of that comes from the energy used to operate buildings after they're built. This is the operational carbon, and it has been the main focus of green building for the last few decades. By using more insulation, efficient systems, and generation, good progress has been made to lower that 30%. But then there's that remaining 10% or so that comes from what the building was made of. This is what is meant by embodied carbon. And changing how efficiently a building operates can't change its embodied carbon. So as you can see in this chart, not all building materials are created equal. Insulating a 4-foot by 8-foot wall to R28 with spray foam emits over 1,000 pounds of CO2. But insulating that same wall to the same level with fiberglass emits about 10 times less. So replacing high-impact materials with lower-impact materials can bring down the embodied carbon emissions. And in some ways, those upfront emissions matter more because they're happening right now as the buildings are being built rather than in 10 or 20 years in the future. The UN estimates we have less than 10 years to make meaningful changes to prevent irreversible damage from climate change, so what we do right now matters. And this is where biogenic materials come in to take it even further and maybe even help save the world. Because we can do better than just reducing emissions. We can build with materials that have already taken carbon out of the air and will safely store it in our buildings. Take a look at the data for the same wall panel insulated with straw. It has a net emissions of negative 500 pounds of CO2. That's because as the plant grows, it takes CO2 out of the air and locks it up in its fibers. If we build with those fibers, the carbon isn't released back into the air. Most bio-based materials have already stored so much carbon that even when they're processed and shipped, they still come out ahead. They are net carbon storing materials. So by building with these materials, we're not just doing less harm, we're actively doing good. We can build drawdown buildings that store carbon and help reverse climate change. Thanks for letting me share this impressive work that we find inspiring. I hope it inspires you to find ways to incorporate biogenic materials into your projects. For much more information, be sure to check out the entire Carbon Smart Materials palette and the great work being done by the Carbon Leadership Forum. Thank you.